I used to think I had a perfect marriage. Ethan was the kind of husband every woman dreamed of, charming, attentive, and always ready with a smile that made me forget the world. For 7 years, I believed our love story was unshakable. We had built a life together, weekend brunches, anniversary trips, and a house that echoed with laughter. But perfection has a way of hiding cracks, and I was too blind to see them. It all started with subtle changes. Ethan began working late, coming home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I brushed it off, convincing myself he was just stressed. Love makes you foolish, and I was the queen of denial. Then one afternoon, while sorting laundry, I found a hotel receipt tucked inside his jeans. The date, our anniversary. The charge, 1 suite, 2 guests. My hands trembled as I held that paper. My heart screamed the truth, but my mind refused to listen. When I confronted Ethan that night, he laughed it off. "Come on, Claire," he said, smirking. "You really think I'd cheat on you? It was a business meeting. I just forgot to clear the receipt." His calm confidence made me doubt myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was paranoid. But deep inside, something had already shattered. Weeks later, the truth came crashing down in the cruelest way possible. Ethan invited me to dinner at a new restaurant. "A special evening," he said. I thought maybe he wanted to fix things. I wore my favorite blue dress, the one he used to say made my eyes sparkle. But when I arrived, I froze. Sitting beside him was a woman, beautiful, glowing, her hands resting on a visibly pregnant belly. Ethan stood smiling proudly. "Claire," he said, placing a hand on the woman's shoulder. "This is Mila. She's expecting." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred. I heard people laughing in the background, forks clinking, music playing, but it all faded into a dull roar. "Expecting what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He smirked. "Our baby." The words ripped through me like glass. I wanted to scream, cry, throw something, but I just stood there numb. Mila smiled softly, like she was the winner of some cruel game. "I thought you deserved to know," Ethan said. We didn't want to hide it anymore. That night, something inside me died. I walked out of that restaurant with tears streaming down my face, the sound of his laughter following me like a curse. But I didn't beg. I didn't chase. I went home, sat in the dark, and stared at our wedding photo, the one where he was kissing my forehead, promising forever. I tore it apart, piece by piece, until only my face remained. And in that moment, I made a silent promise. He would regret humiliating me, because while he thought I'd break, I was already planning something he could never see coming. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight spilling through the curtains, but it felt wrong. The bed was too big, too empty, too quiet. I reached instinctively for Ethan's side and touched only cold sheets. The ring on my finger felt heavier than ever. I should have called my sister, my mother, someone. But humiliation is a lonely thing. I didn't want pity. I wanted answers. So I did what every broken woman does when she's desperate. I opened his laptop. He'd always been careless with his passwords. Within minutes, I was staring at a flood of emails, dinners, hotel bookings, love notes signed, "Forever yours, Mila." Each message was a knife twisting deeper. But one thread caught my eye. A chain of messages titled "Paternity Confirmation." My heart stopped. I clicked it open, and there it was, an appointment scheduled for next week at a private clinic. Ethan was having a DNA test. I stared at the screen for a long time. My emotions shifted from heartbreak to something darker, resolve. If he wanted to parade his betrayal, then fine. But I wasn't going to let him control the story. Over the next few days, I pretended to move on. I went to work, smiled at colleagues, even posted a cheerful photo online. I knew Ethan watched my every move. Guilt makes people paranoid. Then 2 nights before the test, he showed up at my apartment. "Claire," he said, standing awkwardly at the door. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms. "About what? Your baby shower plans?" He flinched. "It's not that simple. Mila's been acting strange. I need to make sure everything's real." I laughed bitterly. "Real? You humiliated me in public and now you're doubting her?" His jaw tightened. "I made mistakes, but you have no idea what's been happening." I leaned closer. "Then enlighten me, Ethan. What exactly have you done?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, the timing's weird, okay? She said she's 4 months along, but that doesn't line up with when we... He stopped himself. When you cheated? I finished for him. He looked away, shame flickering across his face. Just stay out of it, Claire. I'll handle it, but I had no intention of staying out. I wanted to see his perfect little fantasy crumble, the same way he'd destroyed mine. The day of the test, I followed them to the clinic. I stayed in my car, far enough not to be noticed but close enough to see them walk in, hand in hand. She looked radiant, her belly more pronounced now. He looked anxious, checking his watch every few seconds. An hour later they emerged. Mila was smiling. Ethan looked pale. 2 days passed before I heard from him again. He called late at night. "Claire," he said, his voice shaky, I need to see you." I hesitated but agreed. When he arrived, he looked like a ghost. "It's not mine," he whispered. I blinked. "What? The baby?" The DNA test came back negative. Mila lied. "It's not mine." I should have felt satisfaction, triumph even. But all I felt was a cold, empty ache. He buried his face in his hands. "I left everything for her. My job's a mess, my family hates me, and for what?" I studied him quietly. "Did you really think you could destroy me and still win?" He looked up, eyes wet. "Claire, I made a mistake. Please, I just want to come home." Home. That word used to mean everything. Now it just sounded pathetic. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. "You already have a home, Ethan. Go back to your lies." He reached out, but I stepped back. "You showed me what I meant to you. Now let me show you what you mean to me." Then I closed the door. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and smiled for the first time in months. Karma had done what I couldn't, but deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. Men like Ethan don't disappear quietly. And I was right, because 3 weeks later, there was a knock on my door, and when I opened it, Mila was standing there. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. "Please," she said, her voice shaking. "I need your help." When I saw Mila standing on my porch, every instinct screamed to slam the door shut. But curiosity, and maybe vengeance, made me pause. Her once flawless makeup was smeared, her hair tangled, eyes swollen from crying. She looked nothing like the glamorous woman who'd paraded through that restaurant. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. She hesitated. "Please, Claire." "I didn't know where else to go." I crossed my arms. "You had no problem finding Ethan's house." Her lips quivered. "It's not what you think." I almost laughed. "Oh, really? Then please enlighten me. What exactly did I think? That you were sleeping with my husband and pretending he's the father of your child?" Tears streamed down her cheeks. "It started as a mistake. I didn't plan for any of this. Neither did I snapped. "But here we are." She looked at me like she wanted to say something, then froze. "Can I come in, please? Just for a few minutes." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She entered cautiously, like a child afraid of being punished. I gestured toward the couch. "Talk." She took a deep breath. "The baby." "It's not Ethan's. It's my ex's. I found out weeks after I met him. But by then I was desperate. My ex left me with debts, and Ethan, he was kind, rich, lonely. I saw an opportunity." My stomach turned. "So you trapped him with a fake pregnancy?" She nodded miserably. "At first it was about survival. But later, when he left you, when I saw how much pain he caused, I wanted to make him suffer too." I stared, trying to read her expression. "You expect me to believe you're suddenly the victim?" She shook her head. "No, I wanted to warn you. Ethan's not the man you think he is. There's more you don't know." My jaw tightened. "What are you talking about?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "I found this hidden in his briefcase. It has emails, transactions, evidence. He's been moving money offshore, transferring everything under a new name. He planned to leave both of us." I froze. "What?" She slid the flash drive across the table. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I swear I thought he loved me. But now, he's threatening me. He said if I tell anyone, I'll regret it." Something in her trembling voice felt real. For the first time, I saw not a rival, but another woman destroyed by the same man. Still, I stayed guarded. "Why bring this to me?" "Because," she whispered, "you're the only one he's ever been afraid of." That sentence hung in the air like a ghost. I picked up the flash drive, my mind racing. Offshore accounts, fake names. If what she said was true, Ethan had built his own escape plan long before the affair. "Go," I said finally. "I'll handle it." She looked relieved but terrified. "Be careful, Claire. He's not who he pretends to be." After she left, I sat for hours staring at the flash drive. Every part of me screamed to destroy it, to walk away, to stop caring. But I couldn't. The next morning, I plugged it into my laptop. And what I saw changed everything. There were folders of receipts, email exchanges with a lawyer in another country, and even a scanned copy of fake identification, Ethan's photo. But under a different name. He wasn't just leaving me. He was disappearing. By the time I reached the last folder, my hands were trembling. There it was, a wire transfer receipt to an account in Switzerland for $500,000, money from our savings. Rage replaced every trace of heartbreak. I'd been betrayed before, but this time I would fight back. I called my lawyer and explained everything, carefully leaving out Mila's involvement. He agreed to meet the next morning. That night, Ethan called again. "Claire," he began, his voice rehearsed, "I know things have been hard. Maybe we could talk just one last time?" I almost laughed. "Oh, we'll talk," I said, "but not tonight." He hesitated. "Tomorrow then? Lunch at the usual place?" "Perfect," I thought. "Sure," I said sweetly. "The usual place." After hanging up, I packed the flash drive and copies of the documents. My plan was simple. Meet him, record everything, then let him walk straight into his own trap. But as I stood in front of the mirror, rehearsing what I'd say, a thought crept in. If I exposed him, I'd win. But I'd also destroy the last piece of my old life. Then again, hadn't he already done that for me? The next day, I arrived early at the restaurant. I chose the same table where he'd once flaunted Mila. This time, I was the one in control. Ethan arrived a few minutes later, wearing that same smug smile. "Claire," he said, sitting down. "You look—" "Well, I am," I replied calmly. "And you?" He smirked. "Let's just say things are complicated." "Oh, I'm sure they are." I slid the flash drive across the table. His smile faltered. "What's this?" "You tell me," I said. "I found it in your briefcase." His face went pale. "Where did you—" "Don't bother lying," I interrupted. "I know everything, Ethan. The transfers, the fake name, the offshore accounts. Planning a new life without me or her?" He swallowed hard. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice steady. "You used me, you lied, and you thought you'd walk away clean. But you made one mistake," he glared. "And what's that?" "You underestimated me." I stood up, leaving the flash drive on the table. "My lawyer has copies of everything. If I disappear, this goes straight to the authorities." He stared, speechless. "Goodbye, Ethan," I said, walking away. "Enjoy your new life, if you can still afford it." As I stepped outside, sunlight hit my face. For the first time in months, I felt free. But freedom came with a price. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Because men like Ethan don't forgive, they retaliate. The next morning started quietly, too quietly. I brewed my coffee, fed Luna the cat, and tried to act normal, but inside I was counting the hours since my meeting with Ethan. At 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mrs. Bennett?" "This is Officer Cruz. We received a report about missing company funds linked to your name. We need you to come down to the station." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "My name?" "Yes, ma'am. Your signature appears on several transfer authorizations." My stomach dropped. Ethan. He'd turned the tables before I could blink. At the station, they showed me printouts, transactions I'd never made, each with my forged signature. Ethan had beaten me to it, claiming I'd stolen his money to cover debts. When I walked out 2 hours later, my legs were shaking. My bank account was frozen, my reputation in question, and I had 48 hours to provide proof. I went straight to my lawyer. "He forged everything," I said. He sighed. "Then we prove it. Do you still have the original files?" I opened my purse and froze. The flash drive was gone. That evening, rain hit the windows like nails. I checked drawers, bags, even under the couch cushions. Nothing. Then a text arrived, Ethan. "Lose something?" Attached was a photo of the flash drive in his hand. Ethan, you shouldn't have crossed me, Claire. You want a war? You got one. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. He wasn't just retaliating. He was destroying me piece by piece. The next morning, I found Mila sitting outside my bakery in her car. Her eyes were wide with panic. He called me too, she said the moment I opened her door. He said if I don't keep quiet, he'll send my fake pregnancy messages to the police. Then he's bluffing both of us, I replied. We're his loose ends, she nodded, trembling. What do we do? I looked at her. We stopped being victims. We spent hours in my kitchen, the smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air, building our plan. Step 1. Get evidence that couldn't be erased. Step 2. Expose him publicly before he buried us legally. Mila remembered Ethan's secret office, an apartment downtown under his fake name, Eric Nolan. She still had a spare key. That night, dressed in black and nerves, we drove there. The city was silent except for the hum of neon signs. Mila's hands shook as she unlocked the door. Inside, the place was minimalist, expensive, and cold. I moved straight to the desk. Password-protected laptop, paper files neatly stacked, receipts, contracts. Then, jackpot, a drawer full of USB drives. We copied everything onto my own drive, photographing each document. As we were about to leave, Mila whispered, Claire. I turned. Through the half-closed blinds, headlights cut through the rain. Ethan's car. He was supposed to be in another city. Panic surged. Hide! I hissed. We ducked behind the kitchen island just as the front door opened. Ethan entered, muttering into his phone. Yes, she'll fold soon. The cops believe me. Once she's charged, we move the funds. He paced closer, pouring himself a drink, unaware of the two women crouched 10 feet away. Mila's breath hitched. I squeezed her hand. Finally, he went into the bedroom. We bolted. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. Rain drenched us. Hearts slamming like drums. But we had what we needed. Back home, I sent copies of everything to my lawyer and an anonymous reporter friend. Within 24 hours, I told Mila, the world will know who Ethan Bennett really is. She nodded, tears mixing with rain. Thank you for not hating me. I did, I said quietly. But now I see you were just another target. The next morning, headlines exploded. Local businessman under fraud investigation. Offshore accounts uncovered by noon. Ethan's name was trending. He called again, dozens of times, but I didn't answer. Then came one final message. Meet me. One last time. You owe me that much. Against every instinct, I agreed. I wanted closure. We met at the pier where we'd once celebrated anniversaries. He looked nothing like the man I'd married, tired, furious, cornered. You ruined me, he spat. No, I said. You ruined yourself. He stepped closer, rain dripping from his hair. You think you've won? You'll always be the bitter ex who needed revenge. I smiled faintly. No, I'm the woman who finally stopped being afraid. I turned to leave. He grabbed my arm, but before he could say another word. Flashing lights illuminated the pier. Detectives stepped out of unmarked cars. Ethan Bennett, one of them announced. You're under arrest for fraud, falsification of documents, and embezzlement. He froze, speechless. As they cuffed him, I hadn't called them, my lawyer had. He'd handed the evidence to the authorities that morning. Ethan looked at me one last time, eyes burning with disbelief. This isn't over, he hissed. Oh, it is, I whispered. As they drove him away, I felt something inside me finally unlock. The storm broke and sunlight pierced the clouds. That night, Mila came by with a box of cupcakes from my bakery, peace offerings. To new beginnings, she said softly. I clinked my mug against hers. And to finally choosing ourselves. Months passed. The chaos faded, replaced by a strange quiet I didn't recognize. Ethan was gone, sentenced to 6 years for fraud and falsification. His name vanished from the company, his empire crumbled, and his face became another headline lost to time. But some nights, I still woke up at 3 a.m., my chest tight, expecting him beside me. Then I'd remember, I was finally free. The bakery became my world. I poured every ounce of myself into it, the smell of cinnamon and sugar filling the air, the laughter of customers replacing the echoes of courtroom whispers. Mila worked beside me now, quietly, gratefully. She'd started therapy, gone back to school, and was slowly rebuilding her own life. We didn't talk about Ethan much. Some wounds didn't heal by revisiting them. One chilly morning, as I was opening shop, I noticed a small envelope taped to the door. No name, just my address written in careful handwriting. Inside was a single folded paper. A DNA test. The words made my knees weak. Paternity results. Ethan Bennett. 0% probability. My breath hitched. I turned it over, stamped, verified, legitimate. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't think. Mila came in seconds later and froze when she saw my face. "Claire? What's wrong?" I handed her the paper silently. Her eyes widened. "This can't be real," she whispered. "I thought—" "So did I said. "You told me Ethan was the father. I was sure." "He said he'd done the test already. He showed me results." "He forged them," I muttered. "Just like everything else." We stood there, surrounded by the smell of rising dough and burning coffee, trying to process the lie behind all the others. Later that night, I couldn't shake the thought. If Ethan wasn't the father, then who was? And why, after all these months, was this paper showing up now? I called the clinic that issued it. The nurse on the line said, the test was requested by Ethan Bennett 2 days before his arrest. It was never picked up. 2 days. He'd known. He'd known the baby wasn't his, but he'd still flaunted Mila around, using her as a weapon against me. Maybe because the truth would have made him look weaker, or maybe he planned to destroy her too. The next day, Mila showed up looking pale. "I think I know who the father might be," she said quietly. I looked at her, waiting. She hesitated. "It's someone from Ethan's circle. A man who worked with him, who kept threatening to expose him if he didn't pay him back." "Who?" "Lucas." I froze. Lucas was Ethan's closest business partner. The one who testified for him during the trial. The one who'd mysteriously disappeared afterward. That evening, after closing the shop, I opened my old laptop. The same one I'd used to expose Ethan. I started digging. Emails, transfers, hidden files, and then I found it. A chain between Ethan and Lucas, dated just before everything collapsed. Lucas: "If you don't pay what you owe, I'll tell your wife the truth about Mila's baby." Ethan: "You won't, because if you do, we both go down." So Lucas knew, and now that Ethan was behind bars, who knew what Lucas would do with that information? The following week, strange things started happening. My car alarm went off at 2 a.m. My bakery door was found unlocked, though I knew I'd closed it. And one night, I caught a glimpse of a dark car idling across the street, headlights off. Mila was terrified. "What if it's him?" she whispered. "It might be," I said. "But if he wants a war, he'll find out I learned from the best." I installed cameras, alerted the police, and called my lawyer again. We had enough evidence from Ethan's files to reopen more cases, including Lucas's involvement. When the detectives came by to collect everything, one of them paused. "You've been through hell, Mrs. Bennett. You sure you want to keep digging?" I met his eyes. "I don't dig to destroy. I dig to end it." 3 weeks later, it ended. Not how I expected. Lucas was arrested while trying to flee the country. His charges, tax evasion, fraud, and blackmail, and in his confession, he admitted everything, including that the baby had been his, not Ethan's. When Mila heard, she collapsed into tears, half relief, half grief. "He used both of us," she whispered, "and the baby. He's innocent." I took her hand. "Then we make sure he grows up knowing the truth." Not the lies. The story hit the news again. This time, people saw the full picture. Not just a scorned wife or a cheating husband, but the corruption that poisoned everything around him. And somehow, the public's sympathy turned toward me. Not that I needed it. I just needed peace. So I started something new, a charity fund for women who'd been financially or emotionally manipulated by their partners. We called it the Claire Project. Every week, new faces walked through my bakery doors. Women who'd been silenced, gaslit, broken. They shared their stories. And for the first time in years, I felt my pain had a purpose. One afternoon, a letter arrived yes from prison. No return name, but I knew the handwriting immediately. Ethan. I heard about Lucas. About the baby. Guess you got the last laugh after all. But tell me, Claire, does it make you happy? Knowing everything fell apart because of you? I smiled faintly, folded the letter, and tossed it into the trash. No reply. No closure owed. That night, as I locked up the bakery, Mila came out holding her son. Say goodnight to Aunt Claire, she whispered. The baby giggled. Tiny fingers reaching out to me. For a second, I hesitated, then held him, warm, soft, innocent. He looked up at me with big brown eyes. Not Ethan's, not Lucas's, just his own, and in that moment, all the pain, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, they all finally meant something because I'd survived, and that was enough. The next morning, I thought I was done with Ethan, but the past has a strange way of clawing its way back, just when you think it's over. 2 days after I threw his letter away, another one arrived. This time it wasn't handwritten. It was typed, official-looking, stamped by the prison mail service. The envelope trembled in my hands. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Claire, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know something before it's too late. Lucas wasn't the only one lying. The people who helped me hide money, they're still out there. And now they want me dead. Be careful. Ethan, I stared at the page, my stomach twisting. For months, I'd tried to forget him. His voice, his lies, his control. Now he wanted to pull me back into the nightmare again. I almost tore the letter in half. But something about the last line made me pause. Be careful. Was it just manipulation? Or was it real? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing every creak in the walls, every faint sound outside. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. An unknown number, unknown. You should have stayed quiet, Mrs. Bennet. My heart stopped. Then, another message. Unknown. You and the girl are next. I froze. Mila was upstairs asleep with the baby. I grabbed my phone and ran to her room, shaking her awake. Mila! Get up, we need to go now! Her eyes widened when she saw my face. What happened? I showed her the texts. Within minutes, we packed whatever we could and drove to the police station. By morning, the police had traced the number to a burner phone. No ID, no location. The detective looked grim. This could be connected to Ethan's associates, he said. We've been tracking several names he worked with, all with ties to money laundering. I sighed, my hands trembling. So what now? For now, he said, you stay somewhere safe. We'll keep patrols around your property. Don't open any unknown mail. Don't travel alone. I nodded, but deep down I knew fear was creeping back in. That same helplessness I swore I'd buried. We stayed in a friend's guest house for a few days. Mila tried to distract herself by playing with the baby, but I could see it in her eyes, the guilt. This is my fault, she said one night, her voice cracking. No, I told her. It's Ethan's, and the people who helped him. But if I hadn't, I stopped her. You trusted him. So did I. That doesn't make us to blame. For the first time, she cried openly. I held her like a sister, like two survivors clinging to what was left. A week later, the police caught a break. A warehouse raid outside the city led to the arrest of 3 men, all tied to Ethan's offshore accounts. And in one of their possession, a photo, it was me. Taken through my bakery window, the detective called me in. We think they were planning to intimidate you into silence, he said. But thanks to your report, we stopped them in time. I sat there, numb. It was over. Again. Finally. The next day, another letter came. This one forwarded from the prison. It was short, shaky handwriting. Ethan's again. They came for me last night. I'm alive, barely. I thought I could control everything. But I was wrong. I know I can't fix what I did. But please, tell Mila I'm sorry. And tell our son, no, her son, to be better than me. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just folded the letter neatly and placed it in a box labeled Past. Because that's all he was now, a chapter I'd already finished. Months passed. Life returned, slowly but surely. The bakery flourished again. We expanded to 2 more locations. People came not just for the pastries, but for the story behind them. Every interview, every customer who asked, I told them the same thing. You can survive anything, even betrayal, if you refuse to let it define you. Mila's son, she named him Oliver, grew fast. One morning he toddled into the bakery, laughing, frosting all over his cheeks. He called me Auntie Cake, and somehow it stuck. Those were the moments I lived for. Simple, pure, real. Then one evening, just as I was closing shop, a man walked in. Tall, polite, familiar eyes. "Mrs. Bennet?" he asked softly. I turned high and froze. It was Detective Harris, but dressed casually for once. He smiled. "Didn't mean to startle you. Just wanted to tell you the case is officially closed." I exhaled, almost laughing from relief. "After all this time?" He nodded. "Ethan passed away in prison last week. Heart failure. I felt nothing, no joy, no sadness, just peace." "Thank you," I said quietly. He studied me for a moment. "You did good, Claire. Most people don't survive that kind of storm. But you turned it into something better." I smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe I just stopped running. That night, I took a walk by the pier, something I hadn't done in years. The sea breeze was cold but comforting. I sat down on a bench, watching the sunset fade into a violet horizon. The world had moved on, and so had I. My phone buzzed. A text from Mila. "Oliver wants to see you tomorrow. He said he dreams of you baking the big cake." I laughed softly. For once, my heart didn't ache, because everything I lost had made room for what truly mattered. As I stood to leave, I whispered into the wind, "Goodbye, Ethan." The waves crashed softly against the rocks, like an answer, and for the first time in years, I didn't look back. 6 months had passed since Ethan's death. The world had gone quiet again, too quiet sometimes. The bakery was my sanctuary, filled with the scent of vanilla and caramel, the warmth of ovens, and the sound of life returning. Every morning I'd tie my apron, wipe the counter, and whisper, "We made it, because we did." Mila had found a small apartment nearby and was studying part-time while raising little Oliver. She'd visit every few days, and the bakery always turned brighter when they came. One afternoon, as I arranged cupcakes by the window, she walked in with a shy smile. "Guess what?" she said, holding a letter. "I got accepted into culinary school." I froze mid-step, then smiled so wide it almost hurt. "That's wonderful, Mila." She laughed nervously. "I was scared to tell you. I thought you might think I'm running away." I shook my head. "Running away? No, you're building something. Just like I did." We hugged, and for the first time I realized she wasn't that scared young woman anymore. She had fire in her eyes, the kind that comes after surviving a storm. That night, after closing the bakery, I sat alone by the counter, sipping tea. The quiet hum of the fridge, the ticking of the wall clock. It all felt like music now. My eyes drifted to the photo pinned to the notice board, me and Mila, covered in flour, laughing as Oliver sat on the counter reaching for cookies. That was my real success. Not the bakery, not the money, but this, peace after chaos. A few days later, a stranger walked into the bakery near closing time. He was in his 40s, dressed in a navy suit, a kind face, and gentle eyes that seemed to understand silence. "Excuse me?" he said softly. "Are you Claire Bennet?" "Yes," I replied cautiously. He smiled faintly and handed me a small package. This was found among the prison's unclaimed possessions. "They said it belonged to your husband." My stomach clenched. "Ethan?" He nodded. "I'm Father Gregory. I used to visit him every Sunday." I hesitated, then took the package. "Did he ever talk about us?" Father Gregory looked at me kindly. "Every time. He said he didn't deserve forgiveness, but he hoped someday you'd find peace, even if it wasn't with him." I swallowed hard. "Thank you," I whispered. He smiled and left quietly, the doorbell ringing softly behind him. I stared at the package for hours that night before I finally opened it. Inside was a small photo album, old, faded, of our early years. The bakery's construction, our first house, my laughter frozen in time beside the man I used to love. At the back, there was a note in Ethan's handwriting. "You were the best part of me, even when I was the worst." Tears welled up. Not out of longing, but release, the kind that comes when a wound finally stops bleeding. I placed the album on a shelf, between recipe books where it would stay, not as a reminder of pain, but of lessons learned. Weeks turned into months again. The bakery grew busier, and I hired 2 assistants to help manage orders. Every morning, when sunlight poured through the windows, I felt grateful, not for perfection, but for the chance to rebuild. One Saturday, Mila and Oliver came over early to help. Oliver had a tiny apron that said Mini Baker. As I guided his little hands to knead dough, he giggled. "Grandma Claire, I made a snake." I laughed, genuinely laughed. "That's the best-looking snake I've ever seen." Mila leaned on the counter, smiling. "He loves coming here. You're his favorite person." I looked at the boy's innocent face, his bright eyes, and whispered, "He reminds me that good things can come from broken stories." That afternoon, the doorbell rang again. A woman I'd never seen before stood outside, elegant but nervous. "Mrs. Bennett?" she asked. "I'm Detective Harris's sister. He mentioned your bakery often. He passed away last month, and I wanted to thank you." My heart clenched. "Oh, I didn't know," she nodded. "He said your strength inspired him. When he was sick, he'd reread your statement, said it reminded him that some battles are worth fighting." I didn't know what to say. All I could do was invite her in for tea. We sat together, strangers bound by quiet respect. And for a moment, it felt like all the pain, all the loss, had somehow turned into something bigger, something that connected lives beyond mine. That evening, as I locked the bakery and stepped outside, the sky was painted with orange and pink. I walked down the familiar street, past the park, the pier, the old oak tree where Ethan once carved our initials decades ago. They were still faintly visible. E+C. But next to them, someone had added a new carving. "Life goes on." I smiled through the tears. Maybe someone else had found that tree and felt what I did. The ache, the hope, the healing. I touched the rough bark and whispered, "Yes, it does." A year later, Mila graduated from culinary school with top honors. Her final project? A 3-layer cake, our bakery's signature recipe. But with her twist, the local newspaper featured her story. From scandal to sweet success, the young baker who found family in forgiveness. I read it with pride. Not as a mentor, but as someone who finally saw the ripple effect of love over anger. Life has a way of coming full circle. Now, every time someone walks into the bakery, they see a small wooden sign by the register that says, "When life burns the recipe, bake a new one. It makes people smile." Some even cry. And I always tell them, it's not just a slogan. It's a survival story. That night, I stood at the bakery window, watching the city lights reflect on the glass. I remembered who I was, the woman who once begged for love, the woman who almost lost herself, and the woman who found peace in flour and forgiveness. The storm had passed, and all that remained was light. I smiled, turned off the lights, and whispered to the quiet room, "I'm finally home." The day of the DNA test results finally arrived. I hadn't slept the night before. Every possible outcome played out in my mind like a cruel movie on repeat. I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore, for the baby to be his. So at least all this humiliation had a purpose, or for it not to be, so karma could finally show him what betrayal feels like. When I arrived at the hospital, Daniel and Lily were already there. She was sitting close to him, her hand resting protectively over her stomach, while he scrolled aimlessly through his phone, pretending not to care. I stood a few feet away, my hands trembling as I clutched my bag. The nurse called us in, and the 3 of us followed her into a small, sterile room. The doctor looked up from his desk with a polite but heavy expression. "The results are in," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Would you like me to read them out loud?" Lily smiled confidently. "Of course, doctor. There's no doubt who the father is." Daniel gave a short, smug laugh, glancing at me as if to say, "See, you lost." But when the doctor opened the envelope and started reading, everything changed. He hesitated for a moment, double-checked the paper, then cleared his throat. "According to the DNA analysis, Mr. Daniel Green is not the biological father of this child." Silence. Thick. Unbelievable. It felt like the room had frozen solid. Lily's smile vanished instantly. What do you mean?" she stammered. There must be some mistake. The doctor shook his head calmly. There's no mistake. The lab confirmed the results twice. Daniel blinked. Once. Twice. His face drained of color. That's not possible. She told me. Lily turned on him in a panic. No, I swear, Daniel, you are the father. Maybe the test was mixed up. But Daniel wasn't listening. He was staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. His voice trembled with rage. You lied to me? You ruined my marriage for this? I just stood there, quiet, my heart pounding, but not out of sadness, out of relief, out of justice. For the first time in months, I didn't feel weak. I felt powerful. Lily tried to grab his arm, crying, but he shoved her away. Don't touch me! You said it was mine. Daniel, please. He turned to me, desperate now. Clara, I don't know what to say. I was an idiot. Please, But I raised my hand to stop him. Don't. You said enough when you made me watch you hold her hand. When you made me feel worthless. Tears welled in his eyes. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought what? I cut him off sharply. That throwing away a decade of love was the right thing? That humiliating me in public was justified because she said she was pregnant? He lowered his head, guilt swallowing his words. Lily tried to speak again, but Daniel turned and shouted, Get out! Get out of my sight! She stormed out crying, her mascara running, clutching her belly as the door slammed behind her. The echo of her footsteps faded down the hall. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that makes you feel every breath, every heartbeat. I turned to the doctor and said softly, Thank you for confirming what I already knew. Then I walked out, leaving Daniel standing alone in that sterile room, his world collapsing. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the rain fall outside. My phone buzzed endlessly with Daniel's messages. I'm sorry. Please talk to me. I made a mistake. I need you. But I didn't reply. Not one word. Instead, I wrote my own closure. I typed a message that said, I forgive you, but I will never return to the version of me that tolerated your betrayal. Then I deleted it, because some messages are better left unsent. Over the next few weeks, the news spread like wildfire. Daniel's friends distanced themselves, his company reputation took a hit, and Lily vanished from town. People whispered, speculated, and judged, but I stayed quiet. I focused on rebuilding me. I started painting again, something I had abandoned years ago to manage his schedules and dinners. I found joy in small things, morning walks, late-night reading, laughter with old friends I had lost touch with. Then, one morning, there was a knock on my door. Daniel stood there, looking thinner, defeated, holding a bouquet of my favorite lilies, ironic, considering her name. Clara, he said softly. I don't deserve it, but I came to say I'm sorry, truly. I crossed my arms, silent. I was blind, he continued. You were everything, and I destroyed it for nothing. I looked at him for a long time. His eyes weren't proud anymore. They were broken. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. Just peace, I know, I said finally. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, Daniel. It just means I've stopped letting your choices control me. He nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes again. You've changed. Yes, I replied. And I like who I've become. He left quietly. I closed the door behind him and smiled. Not out of victory, but because I finally understood that walking away wasn't losing. It was reclaiming myself. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and whispered, You did it. You survived. And for the first time in years, I truly believed it. The morning after Daniel's visit felt different. The air in my house wasn't heavy anymore. The silence that once screamed loneliness now felt peaceful, like a quiet friend who understood. For years, I had woken up to his alarm, his routine, his schedule. But that morning, I woke up to my own life. I made coffee just the way I liked it, not the bitter black cup Daniel preferred. I played soft jazz on the radio, humming as the sun spilled through the curtains. It was ordinary, but it felt like freedom. That day, I opened a small box I'd kept locked away for years, filled with my old art brushes, paints, and a worn-out canvas. My hands trembled as I dipped the brush in color again. With every stroke, I could feel pieces of myself coming back. The version of me that existed long before marriage, long before heartbreak. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Later, I took a walk through the park near our old house. The autumn leaves crunched beneath my shoes, and for the first time, I noticed how beautiful the world looked when you weren't drowning in pain. I saw couples laughing, children playing, an old man feeding pigeons, and I realized life goes on. Always. When I returned home, my phone buzzed. It was Daniel again. This time, not an apology, just a message that read, "I moved out of the house. It's yours now. You deserve peace. I'll never stop regretting what I did." I stared at it for a moment. Then I deleted it. No anger, no tears, just closure. A week later, my friend Mia convinced me to attend an art exhibition downtown. I hesitated at first. I hadn't been around crowds since the scandal. But she insisted. "Come on, Clara, you've been hiding long enough," she said. So I went. The gallery was filled with soft music, laughter, and walls covered in breathtaking art. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. People weren't whispering about me. They were smiling, curious, kind. As I admired a painting of a woman standing alone in a storm, a voice beside me said, "Beautiful, isn't it?" You can almost feel her strength. I turned to see a man, maybe mid-40s, kind eyes, wearing a navy sweater. "It's more than beautiful," I said softly. "It's brave," he smiled. "I'm Ethan. Clara." We talked for a while about art, life, mistakes, second chances. He didn't pry into my past. He spoke to me like someone meeting a whole person, not a broken one. It felt refreshing. As the night went on, he asked, "Are you an artist yourself?" I laughed nervously. "I used to be. I'm trying to be again." His smile was warm. "Then keep trying. The world needs more people who turn pain into beauty." Those words stayed with me long after the event ended. Days turned into weeks, and I threw myself into painting. My living room became a studio. Canvases leaning against walls, brushes soaking in jars, the smell of acrylics filling the air. One evening, I received an email from the gallery. "We're hosting a small exhibition for emerging artists. We'd love to feature your work, Clara." I stared at the screen, tears welling up. Me, the same woman who had once been reduced to gossip and pity, now being recognized for something she created. I submitted 3 pieces, each one telling a part of my story. The first showed a woman trapped behind glass, symbolizing the years of silence and obedience. The second depicted a woman walking away from a burning house, pain behind her but light ahead. And the last one, a woman standing in the rain, smiling, holding her own heart in her hands, whole again. The night of the exhibition, the room buzzed with admiration. People stopped in front of my paintings, talking about them, feeling them. And as I watched, I realized art had given me back my voice. Then I heard a familiar voice behind me. "You did it," I turned. It was Ethan, smiling proudly. "I just painted," I said. "No," he replied gently. "You healed." Months later, my work began selling. I wasn't rich, but I was finally earning from my own passion. I started teaching weekend art classes to children and women who had lost their way like I once did. Watching them paint, laugh, and rediscover themselves felt like therapy. Sometimes, I'd catch my reflection in the studio mirror, hair messy, hands stained with paint, and I'd think, this is who I was meant to be. One afternoon, as I was cleaning up after class, a courier arrived with a letter. No sender name. I hesitated before opening it. It was from Daniel. "Clara, I've been in therapy. I wanted to become a better man, not to win you back, but to learn from what I destroyed. You taught me that love without respect is just control. Thank you for walking away. It saved both of us. Daniel." For a long moment, I just sat there, reading the words over and over. There were no tears, only peace. I took the letter, placed it inside my old diary, and closed it for good, because that chapter was finally over. A few weeks later, Ethan invited me to his art retreat in the countryside. "Just a few friends painting under the stars," he said. That weekend, as we painted by a bonfire, I looked up at the night sky, endless and full of promise. Ethan caught my gaze. "You look happy," he said. "I am," I whispered. "Finally." And for the first time, I wasn't pretending. I went from being the woman people pitied to the woman people admired. From someone abandoned to someone who chose herself. From being broken to becoming beautifully whole. When I look back now, I don't see betrayal anymore. I see transformation. I see strength. And I see a woman who learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself again. 6 months later, the first snow of winter began to fall outside my studio window. The white flakes drifted lazily through the air, melting against the glass, and I found myself smiling, a real, effortless smile. My life had changed in quiet, meaningful ways. I no longer checked my phone for messages that never came. I no longer replayed arguments in my head, wondering what I could have done differently. I had made peace with everything, even with Daniel. That peace didn't come suddenly. It arrived slowly, like the dawn, soft, patient, and certain. The art exhibition that followed became a turning point. My paintings were no longer just about heartbreak. They began to reflect growth, resilience, and hope. One of my newest pieces was titled Unbroken. It showed a woman standing among shattered glass, each fragment reflecting a different emotion: grief, love, betrayal, forgiveness, all part of the same person. A journalist who attended the show asked, "Is this self-portrait your way of forgiving?" I thought for a moment before answering. "It's not about forgiving him," I said softly. "It's about forgiving myself for staying too long." She smiled and wrote something in her notebook, and I realized my story was no longer something to hide. It was something to share. Around that time, Ethan and I started spending more time together, not rushing, not labeling, just being. He was patient, kind, and quietly strong. The type of person who didn't try to fix me, only stood beside me as I fixed myself. One evening, we sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, sipping tea as snow fell around us. Ethan said, "You know, you could publish your story. It might help others who feel trapped." I laughed nervously. "You think anyone wants to read about a broken marriage?" He looked at me with that calm certainty I'd come to trust. "No, Clara, they'll read about a woman who learned to rebuild herself. That's something everyone needs to hear." That night, the idea kept circling in my mind, sharing my truth, not as revenge, but as release. Weeks later, I began writing. At first it was painful, revisiting old wounds, remembering the humiliation, the betrayal, the tears. But as the words filled the pages, I realized something. Every memory I had once feared was now just a story I had survived. I titled the book The Door I Finally Opened. It wasn't about Daniel or his mistress. It was about me, the woman who found her courage after being forgotten. When the book was finally published, I didn't expect much. But then letters started arriving, from women who had been cheated on, from men who felt lost after failed marriages, from strangers who simply wrote, "Thank you for reminding me that pain can lead to purpose." And in that moment, I understood something deeply. The story that once broke me had now begun to heal others. One afternoon, months after the book's release, I received an unexpected invitation from a women's conference in New York. They wanted me to speak about healing, resilience, and self-worth. Standing backstage, I felt the same nervous flutter I had years ago when I married Daniel, but this time it wasn't fear. It was excitement. When I walked onto the stage, the lights blinded me for a second, and then I saw hundreds of faces looking up, waiting, hoping. I took a deep breath and said, "Once I believed love meant sacrifice, that to be a good wife I had to lose myself. But I learned the hardest truth of all, that real love never demands your silence. Real love allows you to grow." The room was silent. Some people wiped tears, others nodded, and in that moment I knew. I wasn't defined by what happened to me. I was defined by what I did after it. After the talk, as I walked through the city, snowflakes brushed against my hair. A woman stopped me on the sidewalk. "You're Clara, right? The artist?" I nodded, surprised. She smiled. "I read your book. I left my husband last month. It was terrifying. But when I read how you rebuilt your life, I realized I could too. So, thank you." I was too moved to speak. I just hugged her. And for the first time, I truly understood what it meant to turn pain into purpose. A few months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, I was sitting on my porch again, sketchbook in hand, tea beside me, when Ethan joined me. He didn't say much, just placed a small wrapped box in front of me. I opened it, and inside was a paintbrush. Not new, but carved with words burned into the handle. To new beginnings. Tears filled my eyes. I looked up at him, smiling. "Ethan." He just shrugged with that familiar calmness. "You once told me art gave you your voice back. I just thought you might need a reminder." I laughed, soft, genuine, free. "I don't think I'll ever lose it again." He reached for my hand, and in that moment there was no grand confession, no cinematic kiss, just peace. The kind of peace that comes when you finally stop chasing what hurt you and start embracing what heals you. Years later, when people asked me how I survived, I'd always say, because I stopped waiting for an apology and started creating a life worth living. I never saw Daniel again, but I heard through mutual friends that he had moved away, remarried, had a child. I didn't feel anger or jealousy, just hope that maybe he learned something too. As for me, my art studio flourished. My workshops became safe spaces for people who wanted to paint their pain into something beautiful. Sometimes I'd stand in front of my students and say, "Don't paint what broke you. Paint what made you stronger." And they always smiled, because they understood. So if you ever find yourself standing in the ruins of something you thought would last forever, if you ever feel small, invisible, or unwanted, remember this: you are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to rebuild. You are allowed to write a new story, because sometimes the ending you fear the most is just the beginning you need.